at 1942 on a wind-whipped evening in February 1945. The shattered ridgeline above Iwo Jima's southern airfield flickered with strange, unnatural light. A group of exhausted Marines from Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 27th Marines crouched in a bomb crater, helmets shaking, rifles held tight against their chests, as a blinding white flash tore across the volcanic ash. It wasn't artillery. It wasn't a phosphorus strike. It wasn't even Japanese mortar fire. It was a flare, except it wasn't a real one. Private First Class Daniel Kersey, a wiry communications wireman whose hands never stopped shaking even on the calmest days, stared at the burning sphere in disbelief. It had detonated barely 20 yards from their crater, bright as magnesium, loud as a grenade, but utterly wrong in color, shape, and sound. It didn't hiss like a flare. It hammered, it pulsed, and every man around him knew it. What the hell was that? Corporal Hennings barked, squinting through the glow. Kersey didn't answer. He was too busy processing what he had just seen, because it wasn't the enemy's doing. The Japanese used flares, sure, but nothing like that. And they certainly didn't fire them toward American lines with no tactical advantage. The flare had come from somewhere behind their position, somewhere American. A second Marine, Owen, the youngest in the squad, whispered, "You guys saw that, right? That wasn't our gear. That wasn't any flare I know." Smoke from the blast twisted upward in a corkscrew pattern, lit by a flickering glare like a dying star. Shadows danced across the crater, long and unnatural. Every Marine froze, expecting shrapnel, or a follow-up explosion, or a Japanese assault triggered by a signal they didn't understand. But nothing came, except a realization. Kersey swallowed hard as the truth formed in his mind. Someone had fired an improvised flare charge, a home-built pyrotechnic designed to burn hotter, brighter, and with an unstable chemical mix that could easily blow itself apart. And judging by the scattered metal fragments lying in the ash, it had been launched accidentally or prematurely by Americans who were far too close. Hennings grabbed Kersey's shoulder. "Wireman, talk to me. That from our ear?" Kersey nodded slowly. "Yes, but it shouldn't have been." The glow faded, leaving the crater in near darkness again, except for one thing. From behind the Marines, half hidden by sandbags and folded flag tarps, the stars and stripes hung limp in the volcanic wind, its fabric illuminated by the lingering white glare. Owen exhaled shakily. "Jesus, we almost got killed by one of our own." Kersey didn't correct him, because he knew something worse. That wasn't a misfire. It was a test shot. Someone behind American lines was experimenting with a homemade flare, one powerful enough to rival battlefield ordnance, and had no idea how unstable their creation really was. And if they fired it again, someone would die. The air still trembled from the blast as Kersey pushed himself up the crater wall, boots slipping in black ash. Fox Company's line stretched unevenly along the ridge, foxholes, shattered bunkers, scattered crates of bar ammo and grenades. Everything bathed in the dying ghost light of the fake flare. Corporal Hennings grabbed his sleeve. "Where the hell are you going, Kersey?" "To find out who fired that thing," Kersey said, voice tight. "If someone's playing mad scientist back there, we need to shut it down before they blind half the line or blow us all sky high." Owen called after him. "But what if it was the Japs tricking us?" Kersey didn't slow. "They don't have our casings, and that thing used American propellant." He climbed over the lip of the crater, keeping low as machine gun fire snapped intermittently from positions further north. The sulfur stench mixed with scorched earth and gunpowder, a constant stew on Iwo Jima. But now there was a new odor. Burned metal mixed with hot potassium compounds. A flare gone wrong left its own signature. And this one smelled like a chemical spill waiting for ignition. As he moved, he spotted fresh scorch marks on the ground. Irregular beads of molten aluminum sprayed in an arc. The blast pattern was short range, meaning the launcher wasn't far. He followed the burn trail. Behind a row of sandbags, two Marines were laughing nervously, too loudly, too forced. The way men laugh when fear is still hanging around their throats. Between them lay a dented M3 grease gun, a toolbox of mismatched parts, and three makeshift metal cylinders about 6 inches long. And standing over all of it, red-faced and sweating in the cold wind, was Private First Class Ralph Hodge, the platoon's unofficial tinkerer. a man with a dangerous amount of curiosity and a terrible sense of restraint. Hodge looked up, saw Kersey, and froze. Hey, Wireman. Didn't think anybody saw that. Kersey's voice sharpened. The entire ridge saw it, and half of them ducked because they thought a naval gun struck behind us. Hodge gave a sheepish grin. Well, better bright than dead, right? Kersey stepped closer, jaw tightening. What the hell did you fire, Hodge? Hodge lifted one of the metal cylinders. Improvised flare. Well, sort of. A distress marker. Or illumination round. Depends on how you look at it. The one's command gave us barely light up. Sand flee past 50 yards. So I thought, why not punch up the burn mix? Make something real bright. Kersey snatched it from his hand. The casing was hand-filed from cut sections of an aircraft drop tank bracket. Jagged edges still visible. The filler mix smelled like military flare compound mixed with powdered magnesium and God knows what else. He nearly dropped it. Hodge. This thing could cook off just by looking at it wrong. One of the laughing Marines elbowed the other. Told you he'd blow a gasket. But Hodge kept smiling, proud. She worked, didn't she? Lit up half the island. Kersey's voice dropped to a cold growl. It detonated 20 yards from our own line. Hodge shrugged. Hey, accidents happen. Besides, we need every edge we can get. Those caves aren't going to illuminate themselves. Kersey stepped forward until they were nose to nose. You set off another one of these, and you'll illuminate someone's funeral. For a moment, the laughter stopped. Even Hodge's smug grin twitched. But before anyone could speak again, a distant horn sounded. A low, guttural signal. Japanese tunnel movement communication. Owen scrambled up beside them. Kersey. Something's happening down the slope. The ridge rumbled as muffled footsteps echoed underground. Kersey's stomach dropped. The bright flare, the blast, the column of white fire. It had illuminated the American position like a spotlight. Hodge's invention hadn't just endangered their own men. It had signaled the enemy. Kersey grabbed Hodge by the collar. You idiot. Your fake flare just told the Japanese exactly where we are. Hodge's face fell. Wait, what? No, they wouldn't react that fast. But they had. From the volcanic darkness below, multiple Japanese voices rose in unison, shouting, scrambling. Racing up the tunnels, carved beneath the ridge. Bayonets glinted. Grenades clinked. The sound of an approaching assault thickened. Kersey shoved Hodge backwards. Get your gear. Now. Owen shouted, they're coming straight for this trench. And as the first Japanese soldiers burst from a camouflaged cave mouth far below, Kersey realized something even worse. The ridge wasn't just compromised. It was the brightest target on Iwo Jima. The first burst of automatic fire streaked up from the black mouth of the tunnel like angry fireflies. Tracers carving orange arcs through the ash. Kersey dropped behind the sandbags as bullets tore across the ridge, snapping past his ear close enough to sting. Owen dug beside him, palms bloody from scraping volcanic rock. Henning's voice thundered from the crater. Contact front. They're coming out of the caves. The Marines of Fox Company scrambled into a ragged firing line. Rifles snapped to shoulders. Bar teams sprinted forward, sliding into position behind mounds of broken concrete. Someone cursed violently as a Japanese round punched through a shelter tarp overhead. But Kersey wasn't looking downslope. He was looking at Hodge, who stood frozen, pale, gripping one of his remaining improvised flares like a live explosive. Hodge, Kersey barked, drop that thing and get a rifle. Hodge blinked, not in fear, but in confusion, as if he still hadn't accepted what he'd done. I didn't think they'd see it. I didn't think. You didn't think at all. Kersey snapped. You lit us up like a Broadway marquee. The next wave of Japanese soldiers erupted from the tunnel. Grenadiers this time, charging uphill with chilling momentum. A knee mortar round arced upward, exploding halfway to the ridge and showering everyone with hot fragments. Owen screamed, they're pushing left flank. Hennings fired his M1 until the barrel steamed. Kersey, get that wire spool up to the next foxhole. If they cut our comms, we lose artillery. Kersey grabbed his spool and dashed forward, ash flying with each step. Machine gun fire stitched the dirt inches behind him. He dove into a half-collapsed bunker, chest heaving. Inside, two Marines clamped a field phone between them, shouting coordinates to the battery rear, requesting he grid reference. Damn it, interference again. Kersey unreeled fresh wire, splicing it onto their line with trembling fingers. Try it now, go. Before they could test it, a deep concussion rolled across the ridge. Not artillery, not mortars. A massive detonation from behind them. The Marines whipped around. A column of white fire had erupted near Fox Company's rear positions. The same unstable flare signature as before, burning too bright, too hot, too violently. Kersey's blood went cold. Hodge, what did you do? The answer came a second later. A panicked scream from Hodge himself, echoing across the ridge. Kersey sprinted back through the ash, hurdling debris and shattered crates. The battlefield blurred around him, rifles firing, grenades blasting, shouts echoing. But he only focused on that plume of blinding white fire. He found Hodge kneeling beside a sandbag wall, hands over his helmet, face lit by the glare of another malfunctioning flare cylinder. The thing was burning sideways, not upward, its propellant cooking off in a violent stuttering roar. Hodge yelled. It ignited by itself. I didn't even touch it. Kersey grabbed him, dragging him behind the wall, as the flare let out a final, screaming burst of light. Owen ducked behind them, squinting. They'll see that from Suribachi. Kersey snapped. They're not supposed to see it from here. But the damage was done. Down the slopes, the Japanese assault shifted, voices shouting, bayonets glinting, soldiers breaking off from side tunnels, and charging directly toward the new flare blast. They were adjusting their entire attack vector. Hodge's device was luring them like a signal beacon. Hennings crawled over the ash, sliding in beside the group. Kersey, we just intercepted a coded call. They think a flare is a U.S. forward marker. Owen's eyes widened. They think we're calling in reinforcements here. Kersey's throat tightened. If the Japanese believed the Americans were marking a landing zone or rally point, they'd throw everything they had into overrunning the spot before support arrived. The enemy wasn't just coming. They were coming harder, faster, and with purpose, because they thought that flare meant something far bigger than a tinker's experiment. Kersey shook Hodge by the collar. Your invention isn't just a mistake anymore, it's a trigger. You've convinced them there's something here worth killing. Hodge stared up at him, terrified. Then what do we do? Before Kersey could answer, a Japanese officer's whistle cut through the air. Then came the sound no Marine ever forgot. A full, coordinated banzai charge. Hundreds of boots hammering volcanic rock, all converging on Fox Company's exact position. Kersey swallowed hard. We hold, he said, and we pray that flare was the worst surprise you brought us tonight. The banzai charge hit the ridge like a physical shockwave, an avalanche of body steel and war cries hammering up the volcanic slope. The ground trembled beneath Kersey's boots. Tracer fire slashed the darkness. The unstable flare behind Fox Company still flickered in sickening pulses, throwing long, jagged shadows that made everything look faster, closer, more violent. Hennings grabbed Kersey by the webbing. Left flank is collapsing. Bar team is down. We need someone on that corner or they'll wrap around us. Kersey dragged Hodge and Owen toward the shattered concrete wall that served as their temporary anchor. Japanese grenadiers surged toward them, some crawling low, others sprinting upright through machine gun fire, eyes wild with fury and adrenaline. Owen braced his rifle on a broken rebar post and fired until the bolt locked back. They're not stopping. They're not stopping. Kersey slammed a fresh clip home, firing into the mass. Every shot felt too slow, every breath too short. The enemy charge wasn't disorganized, it was focused, moving directly toward the brightest, hottest point on the ridge. Hodge's flare had painted their position like a runway marker. A fragmentation grenade landed 10 feet away. Kersey grabbed Hodge and threw him behind a slab of concrete as it detonated, showering them with ash and stone. Owen screamed, clutching his arm, blood leaking through his sleeve. Medic! Kersey shouted. No medic came. No medic could come, because the charge widened, splitting like a river hitting rock. Japanese infantry veering around the flare's glow and climbing both sides of the embattled ridge. Hennings yelled, they're flanking both wings. We need smoke, smoke now. But they had no smoke left. Everything was spent. Everything except. Kersey's eyes darted to Hodge, to the two remaining improvised flare cylinders. Hodge followed his gaze and immediately shook his head. Kersey, no, those things aren't stable enough for anything but suicide. They burn brighter than anything we've got, Kersey said. If we can redirect the Japanese, force them to shift toward another point. Owen winced, gripping his bleeding arm. We buy the ridge time to hold. Hodge's face went slack with fear. You want to fire those things again? On purpose. Kersey grabbed one cylinder. It vibrated faintly unfired, but dangerously reactive. A single misjudged movement and it could detonate in his hand. The smell of unstable magnesium mix burned his nostrils. We don't have a choice, he said. You lit the signal. Now, we have to mislead them. Hennings overheard and crawled to them. His helmet dented, eyes wide with battle shock. Where would you send it? Kersey pointed downslope, not at the enemy, but at a rocky outcrop 50 yards east. If we throw them a new beacon, something brighter, they might adjust their attack vector again. Hennings nodded slowly. If it draws even a third of them away, we hold. But Owen frowned. And if it draws all of them toward that point, isn't Able Company dug in right behind that outcrop? A grim silence fell. Kersey swallowed. Able Company has deeper trenches, reinforced pillboxes, mortars. They can take the hit better than we can. Owen whispered. And if they can't? Kersey didn't answer. Because leadership wasn't about choosing what was good. It was about choosing what was less lethal. And right now, Fox Company was minutes from being wiped out. Hodge looked between the flare, Kersey, and the charging enemy. If I launch this thing wrong, it'll blow us up. Kersey locked eyes with him. Then don't launch it wrong. Hodge's hands shook violently as he unlatched the improvised firing cradle he built. 2 metal rods taped to a saw ammo can. The cylinder slid into place, humming like a tiny bomb. He aimed it toward the outcrop. Kersey braced the guide rods. Owen steadied Hodge's elbow. Henning shielded them with his own body as bullets cracked overhead. Hodge whispered, on 3. No, Kersey said. On now. Hodge pressed the improvised trigger. The world erupted. A violent, tearing scream of igniting powder blasted across the ridge. White fire ripped through the dark. The cylinder spat sparks, recoiled, and launched like a meteor, trailing molten streaks as it arced toward the outcrop. It struck rock, paused, then detonated in a bloom of horrific brilliance. The flare's glow punched through the fog, like lightning trapped in a bottle. For a moment, everything froze. Even the Japanese charge hesitated. Then it happened. Voices down the slope shifted. Movement redirected. A full third of the charging troops peeled toward the new light source, believing it another American signal, another target, another rally point. Hennings exhaled. It worked. Kersey worked. But his relief died instantly, because the remaining Japanese, shorter path, closer momentum, doubled their speed toward Fox Company's trench. The flare trick hadn't bought them safety, only time. And as Kersey reloaded with shaking hands, he realized the truth. If they didn't survive the next 2 minutes, the flare trick wouldn't matter at all. The next 2 minutes hit like a lifetime compressed into chaos. The Japanese charge slammed against Fox Company's position with crushing force. Grenades arcing overhead, knee mortars thumping from hidden pits, bayonets flashing like silver fangs in the flare-lit dark. The volcanic ground shook from the sheer mass of bodies pushing uphill. Kersey fired until the rifles with stock grew hot under his palms. Hennings emptied mag after mag, yelling coordinates to the rear. Owen, bleeding, pale, dragged spare ammo across the trench despite trembling hands. Hodge huddled behind the sandbag wall, clutching his final improvised flare, as if afraid it would detonate from vibration alone. The enemy kept coming. A Japanese officer burst through the smoke, sword raised, screaming for the charge to tighten. Hennings dropped him with 2 quick shots, but the gap he'd opened filled instantly. Another soldier diving forward with a satchel charge. Kersey saw it just in time. He's got a bag. Move. He tackled Owen to the ground as the satchel detonated against the ridge wall. The blast tore through sandbags, ripping the defensive line apart. Kersey's ears rang violently. His mouth tasted like ashen iron. Through the ringing haze, he saw movement, Two Japanese soldiers breaching the line, clearing the gap with bayonets raised. Owen crawled backward in panic. Hodge froze, eyes wide. Hennings jammed a new clip in, but was still a second too slow. Kersey surged to his feet, grabbed a fallen entrenching tool, and swung it with every ounce of strength he had. The metal blade cracked across the first attacker's helmet with a sickening thud. The second soldier lunged, bayonet slicing open Kersey's shoulder. Kersey staggered, grabbed the rifle barrel, shoved it aside, and smashed the tool into the man's jaw, dropping him into the ash. Blood dripped down Kersey's arm, his vision blurred, but the trench held. For now, the remaining attackers regrouped lower on the slope, forming a second wave, more disciplined, more coordinated, preparing for a decisive push. Their officer raised a signal flag. Henning saw it too. They're going to storm the entire line. They'll crush us with one more push. Owen gasped. We don't have ammo for another wave. Kersey's gaze slid to Hodge, and the last flare. Hodge clutched it tightly, whispering, "We can't fire this one. It's unstable. It's leaking. It could blow the moment it ignites." Kersey understood instantly. They didn't need to launch it. They needed to use it, not as a signal, not as a beacon, but as a weapon. He knelt in front of Hodge, steadying his voice. "Hodge, listen to me. If that flare goes off inside their formation, it'll blind them, stun them, break their momentum. They'll think we called in air support or some new ordnance. It doesn't have to kill them. It just has to confuse them." Hodge stared at him, shaking. "You want me to roll a live magnesium bomb down the slope?" Kersey nodded. "Yes." Owen swallowed. "If it cooks off early." Kersey cut him off. "Then Hodge and I die before the rest of you do." A long, terrifying silence settled. Hodge's breath hitched. His eyes darted to the flare's cracked seal, where a thin, shimmering line of unstable compound oozed, like liquid fire licking the air. He whispered, "I never meant to hurt anyone." Kersey placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then make this mean something." Hodge nodded. He stood, hands trembling, face pale. He crawled up the ridge lip, the flare cradled carefully like a newborn made of nitroglycerin. Kersey moved beside him, ready to grab Hodge and dive at the first sign of ignition. The incoming Japanese wave paused at the sight of movement. Then the officer raised his sword and screamed the order. "Banzai!" The charge surged. Hodge took one breath, another, and then he rolled the flare. It tumbled down the slope, end over end, sparks hissing from its cracked fuse, chemical mix sloshing inside like a storm inside a can. Halfway down the slope, it ignited, not small, not bright, not flare bright. It exploded into a miniature sun. A sphere of white fire roared outwards, blinding, boiling, screaming. A magnesium shock bloom so intense it lit the ridge like daylight. Japanese soldiers reeled violently, eyes burning, hands clawing their faces, weapons dropping as the white fury washed over them. The entire charge collapsed instantly, turned from coordinated assault into stunned chaos. Hennings saw the opening. "Fire everything you got." Now, Fox Company unleashed everything. Rifles, bars, grenades, into the disoriented enemy. The shock wave carried through the smoke. The second wave broke. Survivors retreated into the tunnels, stumbling blindly. When the flare finally guttered out, the slope was silent except for the distant rumble of artillery and the choking coughs of stunned Marines. Kersey collapsed to one knee, blood soaking his uniform. Hodge stared at his empty hands, trembling uncontrollably. Owen whispered, "Holy, that worked." Hennings clapped Kersey on the back. "You saved the line, all of you." But Kersey didn't feel victorious, because Hodge wasn't celebrating. He was staring at the blackened slope, his voice small and cracking. "I didn't build that flare to hurt people, but that's all it ever did." Kersey placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," he said quietly. "Tonight it saved lives. That's what matters." Behind them, the U.S. flag still hung limp over the ridge, a stark, high-contrast silhouette against the fading white glow, overlooking a position that should have been overrun, but wasn't. When dawn finally crept across the volcanic ridge, the battlefield looked unreal, a landscape painted in ash, smoke, and the faint lingering glow of magnesium scorch marks. Fox Company held its position, battered but unbroken. The Japanese tunnels had gone quiet. The threat of the banzai charge had evaporated into a haze of drifting sulfur and distant naval gunfire. Kersey sat beside a shattered sandbag wall, the blood on his uniform now dry and stiff, his hands still trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. Owen lay nearby, arm bandaged, eyes half closed, but alert. Hennings checked the perimeter with the last of their ammunition stacked neatly beside him. And Hodge, the man whose improvised flare nearly doomed them all, and then in a single desperate moment, saved the entire ridge, sat alone, staring at the slope where the magnesium sun had erupted. He held the empty flare casing in both hands. The metal was scorched black, warped from the blast, edges curled like burned paper. It no longer resembled a flare at all, just a reminder of how thin the line between ingenuity and catastrophe can be. Kersey joined him quietly. Hodge didn't look up. "I never wanted to hurt anyone." Kersey nodded. "And last night, you kept the whole line alive. If that flare hadn't hit when it did, the charge would have rolled straight over us." Hodge's voice cracked. "I didn't build it to be a weapon." Kersey pointed to the flag hanging behind them, its fabric torn, but still standing. Most things aren't built to be weapons. War turns them into whatever it needs. Later that morning, a message came down from Battalion Command. Fox Company's stand on the ridge prevented a breach that would have endangered 3 adjacent units. Reinforcements arrived. Mortar crews re-established positions. The ridge was secure. Hodge's flare, dangerous, unstable, foolish, and miraculous, became the unofficial symbol of the night. The Marines joked darkly about the accidental sun that scared the Japanese back into the tunnels. But in the after-action notes, the language was far more serious. Improvised pyrotechnic device deployed during close-quarters assault created a temporary blinding effect, halting enemy momentum and preventing overrun of the ridge. Hodge never forgot that line. After Iwo Jima and the rest of the Pacific campaign, he left the service and returned to a quiet life, avoiding fireworks for the rest of his days. But he kept that flare casing bent blackened, still smelling faintly of burned magnesium, wrapped in an old field dressing inside a small box. And Kersey? He carried the memory forward. The night when a mistake nearly killed them, then, by a threadbare margin, saved him. Today the story is nearly forgotten, buried in unit diaries, whispered at reunions, overshadowed by the famous flag raised atop Mount Suribachi. But somewhere in a museum basement, a rusted flare casing sits unmarked in a donation crate, its origin unknown, its significance unrecognized. Yet it belonged to a moment when courage, fear, and improvisation collided, and a crude homemade flare changed the fate of a ridge, a company, and the men who stood beneath a torn American flag in the burning dark. If this story moved you, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps keep these forgotten wartime moments alive. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and whether anyone in your family served in the Pacific or worked with improvised gear under fire. And if you want more cinematic, historically grounded war stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.